Everyone turned their heads when the elevator doors slid open. The lobby of Silverstone Corporate Tower, usually humming with the quiet prestige of wealth and power, went still. In stepped a young woman, shivering, soaked from the relentless rain outside. Mud splattered all the way up her legs to her knees. Her modest clothes clung awkwardly to her frame, and her sneakers squelched against the pristine marble with every step. The contrast was jarring. In a world of sharply tailored suits and polished designer shoes, Madison Cole looked painfully out of place. Whispers buzzed, hushed but unmistakably judgmental. Some laughed under their breath. Others simply stared, their faces twisted with discomfort or disdain. A pair of security guards exchanged glances, contemplating whether to approach her. But something in Madison's posture, a determined set of her jaw, the unwavering focus in her eyes made them hesitate. She was only 25. No car, no expensive wardrobe, just a dream and a resume she had printed earlier that morning at the public library, now damp and crumpled in her trembling hands. She had woken up before the sun even brushed the horizon, pressed her best clothes, and tucked her resume into a flimsy plastic sleeve to protect it from the predicted downpour. As Madison stepped onto the street that morning, struggling to hold her second-hand umbrella against the wind, she had caught sight of her neighbor, Mr. Lawson, a frail man in his 80s wrestling with heavy grocery bags outside his front porch. Rainwater streamed from the roof gutters, pooling at his feet. Without thinking, Madison abandoned her umbrella and rushed over. "Let me help you," she said, her voice kind and firm. She carried the bags into his kitchen, made sure he was warm and dry, and refused the hurried thanks he stammered. It was the right thing to do. But in helping Mr. Lawson, Madison missed her bus. She ran, her sneakers slipping against the wet pavement, her breath steaming in the chilly air. Heart hammering, she cut through a construction city, a risky shortcut, but her only chance of making it on time. That's when her foot slid out from under her, and she landed hard in a puddle of mud. Filthy, soaked to the bone, and shaking, she hauled herself upright. Any sensible person might have turned around and called it a loss. Madison wasn't that person. "I needed this opportunity more than I needed to be early," she would later tell herself. So she kept running, water streaming down her arms, mud clinging to her skirt, determination burning inside her chest like a furnace. By the time she reached Silverstone Tower, she looked more like a survivor of some disaster than a candidate for one of the city's most prestigious firms. But she hadn't come to impress anyone with appearances. She had come to prove her worth. As she entered the lobby, trailing muddy footprints across the marble floor, all eyes followed her. Yet she didn't flinch, didn't shrink. Madison just clutched her ruined resume tighter and made her way toward the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman with flawless makeup and sharp eyes, opened her mouth to speak but then paused. Maybe it was Madison's expression, the unbreakable fire in her gaze, that stopped the dismissal in its tracks. Wordlessly, the receptionist handed her a visitor's badge and buzzed her up to the 35th floor. The boardroom gleamed in intimidating display of power and success. Around the massive table sat candidates polished to perfection. Ivy League graduates in custom suits, faces gleaming with ambition, confidence dripping from every well-practiced smile. And then Madison walked in. A hush fell again. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Her mud-streaked skirt, her damp sweater, her battered sneakers, she was an undeniable eyesore against the carefully curated image of success in the room. One candidate snickered. Another shifted awkwardly, clearly wondering why security hadn't intervened. A third gave her a disdainful once-over before turning away altogether. Madison felt every stare, every smirk press against her skin like needles. But she didn't let it break her. She simply walked to the furthest empty seat, her footsteps deliberate, her shoulders squared. At the head of the table sat Charles Whitmore, the CEO of Whitmore and Bellman Financial Group. Silver-haired and composed, Mr. Whitmore glanced up from a stack of resumes. His sharp blue eyes landed on Madison and stayed there, lingering with quiet curiosity rather than condemnation. The room was heavy with judgmental silence. Still, Madison spoke, her voice low but firm. "I know I don't look the part right now," she said, hands steady despite the cold that gripped her body. "But I believe character should matter more than appearance." The audacity of her words sucked the air out of the room. Several candidates exchanged incredulous looks. One of the interviewers scribbled something furiously on his notepad. But Mr. Whitmore didn't react the way they expected. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. His expression didn't harden, it softened. 30 years ago, he began, voice calm, his eyes locked onto Madison's. "I walked into my first job interview, covered in engine grease." You could feel the energy in the room shift. The candidates glanced at each other, trying to decide whether they had heard him correctly. "I was 22. No degree. No connections. I worked nights fixing cars and spent my days studying alone at the library," he continued. "I didn't own a suit. I barely owned clean shoes. When I walked into that bank's lobby, the receptionist tried to send me away. But one man gave me 5 minutes of his time. 5 minutes that changed my life." His gaze stayed firm, unwavering. "Today, I'm returning the favor." A long breath escaped Madison's lungs. Around her, jaws tightened, and a few candidates dropped their eyes to their polished shoes, suddenly unsure of themselves. "I see grit, Mr. Whitmore said. "I see character. And I see someone who didn't let a storm or 100 judgments keep her from chasing her future. That's who I want working in my company." Tears welled in Madison's eyes, but she blinked them away, lifting her chin. Weeks passed. In the same gleaming tower, Madison stood tall at the head of a conference room, not the muddy, desperate girl from that rainy morning, but a poised, respected young leader. She spoke with clarity, her ideas sharp and insightful, her presence commanding without arrogance. Her team didn't just listen out of duty. They listened because she had earned their respect the hard way. Outside the glass walls, Charles Whitmore watched with a faint smile, hands tucked into his pockets. Pride warmed his chest not just because Madison had proven him right, but because she had reignited something vital in the company, a reminder that brilliance wasn't always polished or wrapped neatly in designer suits. Later that afternoon, a new intern named Haley dropped her coffee in the break room, mortified as brown liquid spread across the tile. Without hesitation, Madison knelt beside her with a napkin. "Hey," Madison whispered kindly. "We all have our moments." Haley looked up, relieved, and smiled. In that small act of kindness, another seed was planted. Madison wasn't just succeeding, she was changing the culture from within. She taught them, all executives, interns, secretaries alike, that beyond every messy first impression, every rough edge, there might be someone extraordinary waiting for a chance. In a world obsessed with polish and perfection, Madison Cole proved that integrity, courage, and compassion shine brighter than any Italian leather shoe or silk tie. And with each act of quiet grace, she paved the way for others who would one day walk through those same doors-muddy shoes, trembling hearts, and dreams still stubbornly clutched in their hands.